Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are going to be checking out some more GoPro helmet cam footage from Ukraine. This is two Ukrainian soldiers using some Igla Manpads to take out, allegedly, some Russian Su-25s. Let's get into it, and we're going to break down just what Russia is trying to do with its aircraft and what Ukrainians are doing to stop it. Let's do it. So one of the things that I always want to point out in all these videos is that if we've watched the Ukrainian drone footage, especially the ones where they're sort of dropping ordnance on the Russian positions, you can see that it looks almost as though the Russians will dig fighting positions literally anywhere. Whereas 90% of the footage of Ukrainian fighting positions, they're always in groves of trees. And that's, of course, because trees provide overhead concealment and in some cases, even overhead cover. It makes it much easier to establish a small trench line or fighting position, especially along the edge here, where you can sometimes clear out undergrowth and you can get a really good field of fire while maintaining overhead protection and cover, which in this conflict, where you have to worry about what's watching you from above, being a harder to detect from the air is essential. Now, it mentions that Russian air activity has been increasing, and I suspect that what is happening is that Russia probably held back a lot of its air power because it couldn't really replace lost aircraft. And so it wanted to preserve its air combat power for really strategically significant uses. But I suspect that Putin is that Russia's probably in a desperate enough situation that they need to pull out all the stops, right? Hopefully try to stabilize the territorial losses they've experienced, at least until they can get conscripts to the front lines, in the hopes that that will give them the combat power to truly stabilize and at least stop the losses they've been experiencing recently. The problem is, like we're going to see, more flights mean more opportunities to get your planes taken out. And once you do lose an aircraft, it's really, really hard to replace them. It's a year-long process or greater to replace downed aircraft. So Iglas are actually Soviet-made Manpad systems. I think, were first developed in the 80s, and then there is a newer one that was developed in the 2000s. But you can see these guys are actually running two Manpads that'll fire simultaneously. So you could kind of see for a minute there, you could sort of see the aircraft, but hopefully you guys understand that just how great the distance is that these Manpads are still effective. So you see, look here and here as we scroll through. Yep, you can see these are maybe afterburners or possibly the aircraft dropping ordnance, but I think this is where they are. So you notice they launched them both simultaneously, and I think this is probably in order to increase the chances that the aircraft's countermeasures are overwhelmed, right? Obviously, they can rely on things like flares, but especially if you have two missiles that are coming from sort of different directions, deploying flares may not stop both of them. I'd be curious to know if it's more effective to do a staggered launch, where you launch one, they deploy their flares, and then 10 seconds later you deploy a second Igla in order to, like push past those countermeasures, or if it's better to just spam two of them in hopes that one will hit. I've certainly heard in other interviews that combatants have said that it takes usually it takes several rockets or Manpads to take out a single aircraft. But as we've seen in previous videos, especially these Iglas are pretty budget weapons. So they cost not that much, probably a 10 in the tens of thousands of dollars. Let's say $100,000 at the high end, and an Su-25 is, let's say, $25 million. Plus, it's way easier for Ukraine to backfill an expended Manpad system than it is for Russia to backfill a destroyed Su-25. So it's worth it to throw, 25, 50, 100 Manpads to get down one Russian aircraft. You still come out financially on top. And so you can see, yep, these guys are immediately getting out of the area, right? They don't know if they've been detected. Obviously, the aircraft itself may have some sort of mechanism to detect that an anti-aircraft missile has locked onto them, a radar detector or something like that. But it's also possible these guys worry that they may have been spotted by, say, a Russian drone, or that the aircraft may have spotted them and at least relay their location. So they seem to be getting quickly back into their fighting positions, which, as we've talked about, in the tree line. Right, there is no reason to expose yourself longer than necessary. This is a sign of as we've talked about, the increasing professionalization and skill of the Ukrainian military. These guys know that, yes, it would be pretty slick and cool to watch, to be a looky-loo and stand there in the open and see if your missile hit. But here's the thing: first off, you don't be in the open longer than necessary, especially after you've called attention to yourself. But two, it sometimes is just as effective. It's not just as effective. Even if you don't take out the enemy aircraft, the enemy aircraft is going to have to behave way differently when they realize that there are anti-air systems in the environment. Chances are that aircraft is probably just going to straight up withdraw from the AO because, again, they can't take the risk of losing something as valuable as a functional Su-25. So even if all you did is scared them off, that still is a victory. Obviously, much better to take out that aircraft, keep it off the battlefield permanently, but just letting them know that, hey, taking the pressure off of whatever other sister unit that aircraft might be attacking or doing reconnaissance on is itself a victory. Just want to point out something else too. Let's back it up for a sec. We've seen some footage of Russian soldiers where they don't have combat boots, and these are like high-end Oakleys. If you haven't, these are very high-end combat boots these guys got. And I don't know, just a minor detail that indicates just how quickly Western supplies are getting to Ukrainian forces and how well kitted they are relative to their Russian counterparts.
Две ракеты ушло. Вижу падение самолета. Да? Ото! Ото! Красавцы.
Okay, they say there's a flash in the distance. I can't really see it, and I have the settings at 1080p. Oh, there it was. There was a small setting, but it's tough to say. There was a small flash. Let's back it up real quick. We'll see if we can see it here. It's tough to say, right, if some of these things are hits or not. Oh, there it was. There it was. Let's see. There it is. Yeah, that's tough to say. I mean, it could have been. It could be a part hitting. It could be the ordnance itself, the rocket having missed and falling to Earth. It could be a lot of things. I wouldn't necessarily say that's confirmation that the aircraft is down. And it happened in Donetsk, where Russia has been trying to push and seize territory to secure the capital of their independent republic. Okay, so this is supposedly radio intercepts of the actual aircraft being downed. It's all Russian. I'm going to link to this in the description if anybody knows and can translate. I believe in the comments when we look here. Here we go. Here's an English translation. They say, Ural, this is Bosman, gives grid coordinate, says we were attacked by an anti-aircraft missile system. on our aircraft. And then he asks, how do you receive it? Probably the Russian version of how copy over. And yep. So anyway, guys, that was interesting. Hopefully you learned something about the effectiveness of anti-aircraft weapon systems and why they are so valuable to Ukrainian forces, whether they take out aircraft or not. Anyway, as always, guys, if you want to see the combat video breakdowns that YouTube has censored and says I cannot show, you want to become members of the Patreon. Thanks to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys make this whole thing possible. I'll see you guys in the next one.